Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Actually Living podcast. I'm your host, Naturally Tom. This is meant to be an introductory episode, not a very long one. In the future, we'll have guests, we'll have certain topics perhaps that I talk about. For now, this is more of an introductory listen to describing what the show is all about, sort of the philosophy. It's called Actually Living. I've called it that because I have this sort of philosophy and idea growing up through life that many many of us are not actually living. We kind of just go through the motions. And what does it mean to really live, right? To be vital, to feel that. I think that's always a path that we're walking. And sometimes we're on it, sometimes we're off. I'm not sure you ever get to the exact end of it, but it's good to be on that path, to create that process and that feeling of what I deem here actually living. And I've broken that down into, at least in this case, I guess, because they kind of fit on the circle and they're the main ones, but 6 areas. And that's to live well, to eat well, to move well, to rest well, to think well, and to breathe well. And you could go on and on with the list there, all the different things we should practice to do well, for lack of a better term. That's a little introduction, however, to the idea behind the title of this podcast and this series. And like I said, today will be an introductory listen. Audio only today. We'll have video in the future, sometimes audio, just depending on the topic. But I thought today audio, and if you're watching this on video, because I will post it to the video platforms that I have, you get to see the slides that I go through. So some pretty pictures that I've made up and some quotes I've used to represent each of these 6 areas. So if you do want to check that out, watch the video, you might already be here. If not, this also works audio-wise as well, and I'll describe what we're seeing on screen. But thought I'd make it both ways there. Just know a beautiful picture of me on this one today, just to try and save space and get it just to record up and ready to go. But like I said, in the future, we'll do some video podcasts, things like that. So this will be considered episode 1, an introduction to the foundation and philosophy that I've deemed actually living, why it's called this, Free from Control and Illusion, the subtitle. So let's get started here. So the first one around the circle is think well, and it's represented by a little guy here that's in a little meditating posture with sort of light around him. And that represents, right, like in old cartoons or drawings, you see like when somebody comes upon a thought, like an inventor, a little light bulb goes off above their head. And, that's this idea of there's this aspect of light there, this inspiration, this sort of light of spirit. In Chinese medicine, my particular area of focus, by no means an expert, but my particular area of training throughout my whole life, really. We have this concept, Shen Ming, this light of spirit, this way in which our thoughts, our body, our consciousness is inspired. And indeed, that is this kind of deeper aspect of thinking I'm calling toward here. And many folks, much wiser than I, writers, folks like Rudolf Steiner, for instance, written a lot about this active process of thinking. And indeed, thinking related to the spirit in the sense that this immaterial becomes material, consciousness preceding matter, the non-physical becoming physical. You have a thought of building a wood table, you then create that in this material matter-based realm, we'll say, and it becomes physical. So indeed, it's no woo-woo here, it's a sense of actual coming to being that we all have had experience with when thinking and creating, imagining other aspects as well. And so I've represented each of these areas around the circle with quotes that I thought really were representative of the idea that I was trying to bring forth when I talk about thinking well or eating well. And so here I've used two quotes, one from Socrates, one from Rudolf Steiner. And again, I've done my best to make sure that these quotes are coming from a real source and they're there. With some of these older folks like Socrates, it's right, like how are these been translated, biblical verses, things like that. But some of those I've still kept in because I thought the idea behind at least the quote there in English is very important. And whether or not they truly said it as such, I just want to make that aware because I think that happens a lot, especially even in the kind of alternative or truther communities. We kind of find something that might meet our approach or our bias and then kind of stick with it. Meanwhile, it was never actually said by that person or there's no source for it. So trying to be due diligent with that here. One other thing before sharing the quotes, we all have probably heard this idea that many of us are taught what to think, not how to think. And that's the real issue we're facing nowadays in our society. This art of thinking has been lost. So much logical fallacy in our thought process, so much of just simple-minded, reductionistic, binary thinking. Really, to come forward and heal, we must, and to better, we'll say, and to move forward, must develop this muscle again, this thinking muscle, we'll call it. So, Socrates here, the mind is everything, what you think you become. The important part here, what you think you become. We see this even, for example, in healing, we'll say, working with clients in the day-to-day. Myself, I see it, and folks, again, much wiser than I that I've learned from, practitioners, great physicians. Often, this is the root of whether an individual heals or doesn't heal. At the end of the day, it's always up to the individual, their ideas of spirituality, they're with their creator, we'll say. There's other aspects as well, but a big piece of it is, do you believe you can get better? Right? The individual that believes they'll stay ill and diseased, or that they have the ability and that hopefulness and the thinking process of thinking themselves into betterness. On the contrary, many people think themselves into different dis-ease states. So that's very important. And again, consciousness preceding matter, you can think physiological dis-ease states into your own body's existence. Next, we have Rudolf Steiner here. To be free is to be capable of thinking one's own thoughts. Not the thoughts merely of the body or of society, but thoughts generated by one's deepest, most original, most essential and spiritual self, one's individuality. So many of us here, this quote I take meaning here in the sense that so many of us think based off what others are thinking. And I would again argue that there's no thinking involved in that. That's merely just perhaps following or being instilled within one's own mind thoughts that are manufactured on purpose. And so it's important to develop, again, that skill of individuality and thinking from a spiritual root. So actionable steps here, always want to leave with that in a way, especially if you're listening. What are you here for? Good information, hopefully, but also what can I do? And so begin this thinking process. Get back to imagination. That's not just for children. Many adults lose that ability. So imagine. And then think through things. Look into concepts like logical fallacies. Those really did it for me. It's like, wow, I didn't realize how many I was sort of committing, for lack of a better term. Read things like Rudolf Steiner's Philosophy of Freedom, and then certain aspects of philosophy. You know, sometimes I can get too philosophical, for lack of a better term, but we need to think more about thinking. Next, move well. And interesting here, I might think, exercise or this or that. But we'll get into this a little more about sometimes we can over-exercise too. It all comes back to balance right here. And that's represented in the little image for move well. So if you're listening, Again, you can go on, to YouTube or other video platforms where I'm hosting these, and you can take a look at the images here, read the quotes, get them down. The image here is two koi fish swimming. That represents the yin yang symbol. Yin yang's about balance, the typical Taiji Tu, the black and white symbol that many of us are familiar with. The quote for Move Well here is from Yang Chongfu, the sort of really important member in the Yang family of which the Yang Tai Chi family is famous for. So Tai Chi Chuan is the art of letting hardness dwell within softness and hiding a needle within cotton. From the point of view of techniques, physiology, and physics, there is considerable philosophy, contained within it. And so Tai Chi is really a good example, right? They talk about Tai Chi Chuan, grand ultimate fist was one way you could translate that, as being this, most deadly form of martial arts in a way. But yet at the same time, all the older folks in the parks are practicing it. So it's this great balance. Why is it so perhaps deadly? Because he says here, hardness dwelling within softness. You go up and try and hit a brick wall with a sledgehammer, eventually you'll crush it, break it. But what if the wall was made of rubber or cotton, right? You can hit on it. It's not going to break. It's going to absorb that. And so this isn't a discussion around Tai Chi, but the example is what I'm using here to show that movement isn't just about this rigid exercise in the West. We have so much, like the great Paul Chek says, so many people work out, not enough working in. He has that concept of working in. Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditative movements, walking and mindfulness, all of these activities, and then even applying those concepts to more hard or external forms of exercise. So while many people do their exercises, they go to the Pilates, the exercises and weightlifting and the gym out there, how many of us are also taking into consideration that there are other aspects to our movement life other than just walking on a treadmill, right? And so really these Asian arts of like the Tai Chi and the Qigong really exemplify a really rounded out, balanced way of movement. There's still some very difficult, physically demanding postures in Tai Chi and Qigong in the martial arts. And at the same time, one is incorporating breath, energy, concepts of proper biomechanics. So it's very much exemplified in that. And that's why I used a quote here from the great master, Yang Chongfu. So when you think about movement, so here's the actionable step. Are you not moving enough? Are you moving too much? And I'd say that out there in society, what we see, and when I see working with others in terms of health, I see actually a lot of people moving too much, right? It's really about 50-50. There's still a lot of people not moving enough. Just get up and walk backwards too. But there's a lot of folks moving too much as well, because it's pounded into, especially American society, exercise, doing it for weight loss. And it's like the reasons on why folks are doing it are oftentimes what keep them from moving forward. So let's end with this on the Move Well. The reason for moving: to bring life force energy in the body and circulate it. Feel good, be vital. How to move? A combination of working up a sweat sometimes when appropriate, being strenuous, building strength, physical strength, vigor, and nourishing the softness aspect of the body. Because some of the most tight, tense, imbalanced structures I've seen are from folks overdoing it with movement and weights and exercise. So bringing softness to that. And that's the balance here. That hardness dwelling within the softness, hiding a needle within cotton. Rigid structure, but not rigid like tough or stiff, but solid, I guess would be more appropriate. And then softness to the fascia, to the network, so that the energy may run freely, unconstrained and unstagnated. So that's Move Well. So what would be an example? Go for a walk, breathe while you walk, swing your arms. Do some Tai Chi, Qigong, or yoga. Wake it up in the mornings like that. Get the things moving. clear the stagnation. And then maybe later on in the day, I might lift some heavy rocks outside, do things outside, get away from these gyms with all these crazy lights. Maybe use your local environment, hang from a tree, you do some pull-ups, things like that. Wherever you're at on the spectrum of ability to move, no matter what age, there's things you can do. Rest well is the next one, represented here an image of a beautiful full moon. Again, all throughout this, we'll see this again, maybe coming because I'm more of my background in the Chinese medicine and the arts of such and growing up in that. So that's perhaps more of my influence. But I, again, tried to grasp from all areas. Here in Rest Well, this kind of relates to what I just talked about, the movement. Too much going and doing and hustle and bustle. It's time to rest. And then when folks rest, I find many do not actually rest, especially in our society. So laying down on your couch, scrolling on your phone is not a restful activity. Still a lot of activity required in that. When we're going through phases of healing, I'm going to call it, and body detoxing, what others might call sickness, colds, flus, things like that. It's rest is so important, to stop, to press the pause button. And that means literally laying and doing nothing. Sleeping, breathing. But yet people say, I'm resting, and they're watching movies the whole time throughout that. That's not rest. So the quote here is from the Tao Te Ching. Very old book, right? Representative there in Taoism. Who can make the muddy water clear? Let it be still, and it will gradually become clear. Who can secure the condition of rest? Let movement go on, and the condition of rest will gradually arise. So I'll let you chew on that for a while, just like I am coming to new conclusions all the time when you read passages like that. But the key piece here, who can make the muddy water clear? Let it be still. Right? The water's all murky, the movement, you trudge through the creek and all the dirt comes up and you can't see. Let it settle and rest, stillness. Now you can see through, it becomes clear. So actionable here. Maybe let's tie it into the thinking. Maybe there's an aspect of, well, I'm having a hard time thinking. Maybe you might need some more rest so that the stillness can arise. Maybe you're moving too much or not moving enough, right? All of these start to connect. It's very interesting. I'm just seeing it myself now after having pieced these down on paper many, many, many months ago. It's interesting how things work in this way, because I approached it in a proper aspect and activity of thought and thinking and willing and and balance. So anyway, rest. Actionable. Have a proper routine of rest. Doesn't mean just, okay, I take a nap every day here. It's also about creating that process of rest. So bedtime is an important ritual time period. Things start to come down and wind down. Lights start to be lowered. Maybe more candlelight, where the good old-fashioned blue blockers reduce blue light exposure in this modern age. Start to, don't be watching crazy shows and movies that stimulate your nervous system. Start calming down, reading, meditating, listening to things that are enlightening and not emotionally inducing. Start to bring that activity of rest, and then gently into bed, maybe gentle stretching and relaxing and breathing, and then sleep. And then the deepest aspect of rest, the practice of sleep, proper sleep hygiene, right? Whole schools of Qigong and Chinese medicine around sleep and sleep hygiene. So rest, very often overlooked, especially in the Western cultures. It's like, I only need this many hours of sleep, or yeah, I'm getting my 7 hours, but it's like, what's the quality of that, and what's the mind doing during that time and process? So yeah, beginning to develop proper mindfulness around your rest. And there are many people tying this into movement that have done way too much movement, whether through exercise or work and work stress, all of that. It's really time to bring back rest. And it's unfortunate, especially in our culture, lastly I'll say on this, is that pausing, pressing the pause button and resting is often looked down upon. It's like, oh, America, you got to work hard the whole time. And that's really at a detriment for our health, for our well-being. So let yourself rest. Next, we have eat well, right? I think as I've come through this my whole life, at one time I thought this was the absolute most important thing. And don't get me wrong, it is indeed important. And eating, we'll talk about here in a moment, is not just food. However, now I've gone through all these different trials on my body and food and understanding and coming to deeper understanding. And this is not number one for sure. So if you could see the image on here for Eat Well, it's not a picture of fruits or nourishing animal foods or vegetables or grains or whatever, what have you. It's a picture of light. It's like a light beam coming towards you. This is what I've come to, again, from those much farther along and wiser than I, we could say, that have talked about this food being the light, the information, rather than just simple calories or vitamins, minerals. More along the lines of food is this energy, and energy in its most subtle form. And so we hear oftentimes Hippocrates, the quote here, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. Indeed. Even in Chinese medicine, the great Sun Tzu Miao, the physician, would talk similar quote like that about addressing diseased states, illness with food first, never jumping immediately toward medicinals. And in his time period, talking medicinals, herbs even. So, right, addressing it with what we're putting in our body. And very important here, learned from my teacher, Dr. Fruhoff, when we talked about the stomach organ in Chinese medicine and how it relates to other aspects of digestion, what you see, what you hear, what you think. You look upon outside, you look at screens that are going by and billboards. All of that is information that we must digest. So what is the quality of the information one is digesting and eating as well? It's not just the food. Is it organic, high quality, local, fresh, love put into it, care for food? Very important, right? When the idea of water and memory and information like that. However, what's the nature? What are violent movies and games and media and all of this information that goes into the body through light, through energy, through imprintation? What's the nature of that, and what are you digesting or eating in that way? So thinking about that. So there'll be plenty more to talk about on food aspects and other aspects of information that we might digest and consume. And yes, we definitely over consume poor quality information, aka food, both in its actual, like pesticide-ridden, low nutrient density foods, but also nonsense media and social medias and television, things like that. So actionable here. Breaking it down to simple. Seasonal. All ancient cultures, especially Chinese medicine, right? Seasonal foods. Eat what grows seasonally. What's there seasonally? What works for your body, your constitution. Developing intuitive eating. Very important. Not hyper focusing on the food, not hyper focusing on this is bad for me. Again, getting back to the thinking well aspect of all of this, right? Forget who said it, many people, but what you think the food will do to you will certainly do it to you. And so praying over the food, being grateful, in a calm state, chewing the food. So yes, in summary, local, seasonal, highest quality you have access to. Gratefulness around it. Understanding that there's so much more that goes into the growing and the rearing and the raising of foods than just the soils and the minerals. Super vitally important, but the bacterials, the information, the light, all of this, so important. It's time to expand our understanding, thinking, and feeling around food as well. And then lastly, Don't be dogmatic about it. So many diet dogmas out there, right? You got to follow this way. This is the only way. This vegan, carnivore, etc., etc. That's why we come back to intuitive eating, and different phases in life will require different information. So that is eat well. Again, important. Practice this myself and really focused on some of those tenets that I just shared. And it makes a difference in my health, my life, my vitality, my emotional state. Next, breathe well. Picture of a beautiful waterfall coming down a mountain. In Chinese medicine, lungs represented by that symbology. Lungs like to be moist. They have a lot to do with the upper source of water, we'll say. Here we have the quote by the great Henry Lindlar, great old school nature cure naturopath doctor. The lungs are to the body what the bellows are to the fires of the forge. Very interesting. We say in Chinese medicine, the lungs connected to the kidneys. The kidneys are like this internal furnace battery, the Mingmen there, gate of destiny, this fire that brings forth that internal energy and essence. And so the lungs help to feed that through the breath. And so many people breathe, right? Just chest, very shallow. So starting to breathe deeper, getting outside to get that fresh air. That moist air inside, right? All this fake toxic building materials that we breathe in. Open windows, bring the light, the nutrition. This feeds into the eat well aspect as well. So much of our nutrition we gather from the air as well. More to talk on that in future presentations. But yes, breathing, vitally important. You can get a lot of nutrition from that, right? Folks out there, breatharian, we'll say, ideas around that. It's a whole nother topic. But breathing, actionable steps here. Start to be more aware of your breathing. Soften it, slender, deep. Coming back to the move well, it ties into that. Practice movement and breathing with it. Nasal breathing as you exercise. Focus only on the nose, not breathing through the mouth. Right, nowadays we see so much of this nonsense of issues sleeping at night due to breathing problems. There's a lot more involved with that, with nutritional components, posture, structure, thought, emotion, but at the same time, what's your breathing pattern during the day? Where's your tongue placement? Where are you breathing from and to? All of these things to think about. So action, go outside, get comfortable, be in nature. Take a deep breath. Look at what nature does. Observe the trees. The trees are your lungs. Breathe well. Lastly here, live well as all those come together, right? We talked about this concept, actually living. To really live your life with vitality, with purpose. So much comes from that in terms of health. Quotes here, we have whatever we think, right, about the Bible. I'm not using this quote in a religious sense at all or dogmatically. I just wanted to, again, grab from all ancient traditions. And again, this is information that's been translated over and over. Who knows? But let's take it as it is in this English form. To live well, a picture here of a heart and a Zen circle around it. Just beautiful. Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourself. Romans 12:10. Right? Just taking that the beautiful sentence there, whether or not that was exactly as it was written or put down, who knows. But being devoted to one another in love, we need more of that. Honor one another above yourselves. Service to others, so important. Right? And don't be careful here. I can already feel it and see it, right? Folks overextending and giving too much of themselves when they've not filled their own cup in a way. So I don't call for that. I do, however, here, I think, as I understand it, mean to really act in service and love with each other, especially our families, those are close to us, to reduce that stagnation of argument, of agitation, of improperly just being, short and rude with others. We need to soften ourselves. It's all tying together here. Next, we have 2 Walter Russell quotes. Very cool here. You have to gather your energy together in the same manner, conserving it and insulating it from dissipation in every direction other than that of your purpose. Life purpose. Gosh, how do I find that, right? Well, we talked about all of these important concepts. I can tell you the first step in all of that, I would say, at least what I've found in my life, really being on my purposeful path my whole life. So blessed for that. And I did the work. I moved my feet, right? The Quakers say, pray and move your feet. I did the work too. And that was all the things we've talked about, the moving well, the eating well, the breathing well, the thinking well, the resting well. And those all culminated together to a process of living well, allowed for me to be more clear, to identify my path, my purpose, to feel what it felt like to be on it, to be in it. And so a big piece of this is like what Walter Russell said. So many of us dissipate our energy in so many different directions, whether that's, oh, I'm going to go out to please these people. Yeah, it's fun, but it's like, is that the proper time for that? I'm not against, going out, having fun, being with friends and all that. But so many of us get caught up in that when we know in our heart it says, hey, stay home, read today, write in your journal about this instead of, I don't want to have the FOMO, the modern term, fear of missing out, things like that. We're dissipating our energy, our sexual interest. That's a literal dissipation of energy in a way if we're not considerate and appropriate with that. Television and media dissipating our energy, our focus, our intent on all of that. So really coming back to the middle, the center, the middle way, bringing it in, gathering that energy, and then from there making the move forward. This kind of in the move well concept, this Tai Chi idea of gathering, settling, storing, stillness first. From there I move. Next, we have the great lesson to learn of life is the need of giving out from the abundance of oneself in order to be ever abundant within oneself. Beautiful quote there from Walter Russell. And again, nowadays, there's so much of this idea of scarcity mindset and not abundance. But take a walk in nature and observe everything we need is there. Find this a lot. I encourage us all to grow things, to garden a little bit, and you start to see, holy cow, nature is truly abundant. Perhaps I just wasn't observant of it this whole time. And then that comes into your life and beginning to practice in that, and sort of giving from that deep feeling of abundance, realizing it's real and it's true and it's there. It's nothing to do, in this case, we're saying with money and riches and items that you have in abundance. It can work in that way as well. However, here it's more so this concept of the first quote from Walter Russell, that energy sense that is held deep within you. And so these are all relating to living well, serving others, knowing thyself, following one's purpose, one's path. That fills you with energy, with joy, right? As I'm speaking this right now, I feel this electricity running through me. And it's this of knowing of this is what I'm here to do. This fills my cup. I'm covering all the bases in that sense, it's sharing and caring and serving others and doing what I love and what nourishes me. So finding that for yourself, and I wish that for you. A great blessing may be for all of us to find ourselves and what we're here for. When we do that, like I said, filled with this electricity, the stagnation starts to fade and the movement goes. And we're filled with that energy. And so lastly, that was live well. Perhaps that's the most important one, and yet it contains all of those. So this concept again of yin and yang and sort of everything in that stillness. So living well. So that is a introduction, episode 1 here to the podcast of kind of my philosophy around these things, and then we'll bring on guests as it relates to many of these aspects. Maybe it'll just be in one aspect of around the circle, maybe in eating well or of light life, magnetism, light energy, or thinking process, or oftentimes you'll find very holistically that'll be all of them included. Because those are the folks that I've certainly learned from, and I feel is very important nowadays to be truly holistic in that sense, incorporating all these. I I hope that was a good introduction, we'll say, for all of this information, what kind of this concept of actually living that I've developed is, and what I've named sort of this podcast in this area of my production of information and materials out there. I hope that was enjoyable for you to listen to, and there's some actionable steps there for you, and nourishes your heart, your mind, your thinking process, and living well. So thank you very much for listening, for watching. Again, I'm doing my best to get this out there on all the podcast platforms. If you want to do it, certainly that's a way I have been able to learn a lot, is through podcast media. Also posting this in the video platform, in this case today, just an audio, but on the video you'll get to see the slides, the quotes, etc. Check out my YouTube, Telegram, all under Naturally Tom. So all of this is under Naturally Tom. And we have this series called Actually Living. That'll be video series, podcast information, presentations, etc. So be well. Again, wish all of these beautiful aspects of the living well concept and actually living to all of you. Have a wonderful day, night, wherever you're at, and thank you.